Imagine a cosmic filter so severe that historians will look back on it and compare it to the year 536 AD.
Oh, man. Yeah, 536.
Right. Like if you're a history buff, you know exactly what 536 AD is.
Hmm.
It's widely considered the literal worst year to be alive in human history.
Absolutely. Just a total nightmare.
A massive volcanic eruption basically blanketed the northern hemisphere in this fog that completely blocked out the sun. We were talking about literal darkness at noon.
Yeah, plunging temperatures, crops failing globally.
Exactly. Famine, and just the complete and utter collapse of societal norms. Or, think about the 4.2 kilo year event.
Oh, the mega drought.
Yeah, that massive planet-wide mega drought that simultaneously choked out the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Akkadian Empire, and the Indus Valley civilization.
Which is just wild to think about. Total systemic civilizational resets.
Right.
The old structures literally could not survive the environmental and, honestly, the psychological pressure cooker of those events.
Right. It's a brutal bottleneck. And, well, the stack of documents we are unpacking today for this deep dive proposes that humanity just entered one of these historical bottlenecks.
A loyalty test, as the author calls it.
Yeah, a loyalty test. And the trigger for this specific era-ending filter wasn't, a world war or a pandemic or some political assassination.
No, it's way more cosmic than that.
Way more. According to this highly intricate synthesis we're looking at, the clock started ticking the exact moment a very specific space telescope arrived at its destination in the dark void of space.
It is arguably one of the most audacious, staggering attempts at pattern recognition I have ever encountered.
I mean, the sheer volume of data is insane.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we have a primary text file titled decodingrevelation.docx.
Right.
And two incredibly dense slide decks called revelation.pptx and women and the red dragon.pptx.
Which are just packed with charts and math.
Exactly. What we are doing today is walking through an architectural marvel of a timeline. The author has taken Christian eschatology, specifically the Book of Revelation, and just fused it with Vedic astrology.
And planetary mechanics, too.
Right. Astrophysics and the literal blood and guts reality of contemporary geopolitics. It's a unified mathematical equation attempting to map the next 2 decades.
Culminating in what they call a golden age in the year 2044.
Which is quite a claim.
But before we get into the math, which is going to absolutely blow your mind, we really need to establish the ground rules for this deep dive. Look, we're dealing with live wires today.
Very live wires. I mean, to understand the mechanics of this framework, we have to look at the specific claims the author makes.
Right, and they name names.
They do. These documents name real nations involved in active, devastating conflicts right now. The United States, Israel, Iran, Russia, and Ukraine.
Heavy stuff.
It is. They also make sweeping predictions about the decline of specific Orthodox religious systems and the rise of radical new ideologies.
Which is why we need a huge disclaimer here.
Exactly. Because of how charged this material is, it is imperative to state that we are acting strictly as impartial guides for you today.
Absolutely.
We are not endorsing any political stance, and we are not validating one religious worldview over another. Our mission is purely analytical.
We're just looking at the math.
Right. We are examining how this author has correlated astronomical orbital math with ancient biblical verses to explain modern global chaos.
So think of it like we are looking at the blueprint of a very fascinating building, but we're not asking you to move in.
Perfectly said. We are the architects studying the schematics.
Okay, so let's unpack this blueprint, starting with the foundation. The overarching premise here is that we are experiencing a Yuga Parivartan.
Yes, the Yuga Parivartan.
Walk me through the mechanics of that, because it kind of sets the stakes for everything else. We aren't just talking about a bad decade here.
No, not at all. We are talking about a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of time. In Vedic philosophy, you have to understand that time is not a straight line moving from point A to point B. It is cyclical.
Like seasons.
Exactly like seasons, but massive. It operates an enormous gear system made up of varied eras known as yugas.
Okay.
A Yuga Parivartan is basically the excruciating transition period between these eras.
So which gears are grinding together right now, according to the text?
According to the framework, we are in a massive overlap. We are witnessing the very beginning of the end of the Dwaparyug.
Okay.
But simultaneously, we are living through the absolute suffocating peak of the Kali Yuga.
Which is notorious for being the dark age, right? Like the age of ignorance, conflict, and spiritual amnesia.
Exactly. The Kali Yuga is characterized by a complete breakdown of dharma, or cosmic order.
People just lose their way.
They do. People become completely disconnected from truth, they get obsessed with materialism, and they are prone to endless conflict.
So, a Yuga pair of Arton, right at the peak of the Kali Yuga, is essentially the friction of the darkest possible era, violently rubbing up against the slow, grinding birth of a new cycle.
That's a great way to put it. It is not a peaceful transition of power by any means.
And to give a visual to that violent friction, the author pulls directly from chapter 12 of the Book of Revelation.
Which is a very intense text.
Right. Now, if you grew up anywhere near a church, you probably know this imagery. It's incredibly dramatic.
Oh, for sure.
It's this pregnant woman crying out in the agonizing pain of labor, about to give birth. She's described as being clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head.
And for 2 millennia, theologians have just endlessly argued over what she represents.
Yeah, is she the nation of Israel? The Christian church?
The Virgin Mary.
But this author completely discards thousands of years of theological debate.
They just throw it out the window.
Pretty much. They aren't looking for a human metaphor. They are looking up at the sky.
Literally. They translate this exact biblical imagery directly into the mechanics of Vedic astrology, specifically the lunar mansions.
Okay, so the nakshatras.
Yes. The author asserts that this pregnant woman is the Bharani nakshatra.
Okay, so we know the nakshatras are the 27 lunar mansions that map the moon's path across the sky.
Right. They break the sky down into much smaller slices than the zodiac.
Yeah, they provide a much deeper, more granular psychological and cosmic flavor than just the broad solar signs. But out of 27 options, why specifically Bharani?
Well, how does that match the woman in Revelation?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the core symbol, the absolute essence of the Bharani nakshatra in ancient Vedic texts is the female reproductive organ.
Oh, wow.
It is literally the star of bearing, of gestation, and of the agonizing physical process of giving birth.
So the symbology matches perfectly.
It really does. But the author doesn't stop at a neat symbolic parallel. They actually back it up with literal recorded astronomical dates to fulfill the physical criteria of Revelation 12.
Right, because the text demands the woman be, quote, clothed with the sun.
And the author pulls out a cosmic receipt for this.
They point to the literal partial solar eclipse that occurred on October 24th and 25th, 2022.
Yes. And the alignment just continues from there.
Because the verse says she has the moon under her feet.
Right. And the mathematical framework maps this directly to the total lunar eclipse that followed exactly 2 weeks later.
On November 8th, 2022.
Exactly. And the crucial linchpin detail here, that specific lunar eclipse took place while the moon was transiting the Bharani nakshatra.
It's chilling how well that lines up. We have the sun clothing her in October, the moon under her feet in November, all happening inside the exact star system of birth.
It's incredibly precise.
But what about the crown of 12 stars? That feels a bit harder to nail down with just eclipses.
Well, the author decodes the 12 stars not as physical balls of gas in the sky, but as a system of time.
Oh, interesting. Like a calendar.
Exactly like a calendar. They represent the first month of the lunar calendar, specifically the ancient Hindu Vikram Samwat calendar.
Okay.
The documents refer to this as the beginning of the Day of the Gods.
So late 2022 is the literal fulfillment of the visual criteria for this prophecy.
According to this framework, yes.
But there is a massive paradox sitting right in the middle of this Bharani nakshatra concept. And honestly, I struggled with this a bit when reviewing the notes.
Which part?
Well, the text highlights the Lord, or the ruling deity, of this specific star of birth.
Ah, yes. The ruling deity of Bharani is Yum.
And Yum is the god of death.
He is.
So the star representing a pregnant woman, gestation, and bringing new life into the world is ruled by the god of death.
I know, it sounds crazy.
From a Western linear perspective, that is a complete contradiction. It makes absolutely no sense.
Right. If you view time as a straight line, it's a paradox.
Yeah.
But remember, we are operating in a cyclical framework here. Birth and death are not opposites on a line. They are the exact same point on a circle.
Okay, that helps to visualize it.
The author explicitly states in the text, quote, "End is the beginning of new. You cannot birth a new era without the complete, uncompromising death of the old one."
So what does this actually look like in practice? Think about it like a forest fire, right?
Okay, I like that analogy.
To the old, towering pine trees that have dominated the canopy for centuries, a massive wildfire looks exactly like the god of death.
Sure, it's the end of their world.
It is terrifying, it is destructive, and it is the absolute end for them.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out and look at the broader ecosystem, that intense, localized heat is the precise biological trigger required.
To melt the resin on the pine cone.
Exactly. It's the only way to release the seeds buried in the soil that will give birth to the next generation of the forest.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
So the text is basically saying humanity is the old forest, and we just entered the fire. The old systems have to burn.
The fire is painful, but it is deeply necessary for the biological continuity of the forest. And this perfectly transitions us to the next major character in this drama. Because if the woman represents this late 2022 cosmic alignment signaling a painful, necessary birth.
Who is the antagonist?
Exactly. Revelation says a massive red dragon stands in front of the woman, waiting to devour her child the absolute moment it is born.
The ultimate villain. Traditionally, the church says the red dragon is Satan.
Right. But again, our author takes a hard left turn away from traditional theology.
They drive us straight into the cold, hard realm of orbital mechanics and modern astrophysics.
The transition here is breathtaking, honestly. The framework identifies the red dragon as the shadow planet Rahu.
Okay, let's pause and define that, because shadow planet sounds like a villain's lair in a comic book.
It does sound like sci-fi.
Yeah, Rahu isn't a physical rock floating in space like Mars or Venus, right?
Correct. In Vedic astrology, Rahu, along with its counterpart Ketu, are what we call lunar nodes.
Yeah?
They're mathematically calculated, completely invisible points in space.
So they aren't physical objects at all.
No. They are the exact intersections where the moon's orbital path crosses the ecliptic, which is the apparent path of the sun from our perspective here on Earth.
And those intersections are the only places where eclipses can physically happen.
Yes.
Which makes total sense historically, right? Ancient astronomers watched the sky, saw the sun completely disappear in the middle of the day.
And without a telescope to see a physical object blocking it?
They just assumed a giant invisible dragon had just swallowed it. So Rahu literally is the dragon.
Precisely. It is the celestial mechanism of the eclipse.
That's brilliant.
But the author does not leave Rahu in the realm of ancient mythology. They make a connection to literal, modern space exploration that fundamentally changes how you read the text.
This is where it gets crazy.
They state that Rahu, this shadow dragon, corresponds to a very specific gravitational location in our solar system, Lagrange point L2.
Wow.
The document literally refers to L2 as the gate of the demonic spirit.
Okay, I have to admit, when I read Lagrange point L2 in a document attempting to decode the Book of Revelation, my jaw literally hit the floor.
I had the exact same reaction.
The juxtaposition is wild. Let's break down the physics for a second, just so we are all on the same page. What makes a Lagrange point so special, and why L2 specifically?
Well, Lagrange points are essentially gravitational parking spots in space.
Okay.
They are positions where the gravitational pull of two massive bodies, like the Sun and the Earth, perfectly equal the centripetal force required for a small object to orbit with them.
So things just kind of get stuck there.
Sort of. If you put a satellite in a Lagrange point, it stays locked in relatively the same position without expending much fuel at all.
And where is L2?
L2 is located about 1,000,000 miles away from Earth, directly opposite the Sun.
So Earth is permanently blocking the direct light of the sun from hitting L2.
Yes. It is a point of permanent freezing shadow, a point of deep, uninterrupted darkness.
The gate of the demonic spirit. You really can't deny the dark poetry of that.
It's very evocative.
But the framework uses L2 as a literal modern timing mechanism. The author notes that this entire Yuga Parivartan transition, this terrifying era of the forest fire, officially kicked off on January 24, 2022.
Right.
Now, what happened on that day? No wars started. No major political assassinations happened.
But something monumental did happen in space.
Exactly. It was the exact day the James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most advanced multi-billion-dollar eye in the sky, arrived at its permanent orbit at Lagrange point L2.
The author actually writes, quote, "The date January 24th, 2022 will be remembered by the whole human race."
Wait, are they implying that by sending our flagship telescope into the dragon's lair into the permanent shadow of Rahu, we essentially tripped a cosmic wire?
That is exactly the implication. The insertion of human technology into the node of the shadow planet acted as the catalyst. It began the sequence.
Oh my God. And if you thought the telescope connection was intense, the map that follows is where this deep dive officially goes off the rails into genius territory.
The math is where you really see the architecture of this theory.
Because Revelation 12 says that the dragon's tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth.
Yes.
Typically, people read that and think, okay, Satan took a third of the angels down with him when he fell.
That's the standard Sunday school interpretation.
Right. How does this author decode a third of the stars?
By treating it as a literal orbital math equation based on the solar calendar.
Okay, walk me through it.
The author takes the number of days in a standard solar year, which is 365.
Right.
They take the biblical fraction, a third of the stars, and divide the year by 3.
So 365 divided by 3 gives you roughly 121.6 days.
Exactly. So let's call it 121 or 122 days.
Okay, I'm following the math. We have roughly 121 days representing the third the dragon took.
Then the author subtracts that third from the full 365-day year.
Oh, I see.
So 365 minus 121.6 leaves you with a remainder of roughly 243 or 244 days.
Okay, got it.
The text then instructs us to take that remainder and count backward from the trigger point of the solar eclipse we discussed earlier, the woman clothed with the sun.
Which was October 24th and 25th, 2022.
Right.
So if I pull out my calendar and I count exactly 243 or 244 days backward from October 24th, 2022, I land exactly on February 24th, 2022.
Which is the precise date that Russian forces crossed the border, initiating the Russia-Ukraine war.
See, here's where I have to push back a bit, because this is almost too perfect.
It is a stunning correlation.
Is this author seriously suggesting that John of Patmos, sitting in a cave 2,000 years ago writing the book of Revelation, actually saw a 365-day solar calendar math equation disguised as a dragon's tail?
Well,
Or are we looking at the ultimate Texas sharpshooter fallacy here?
right.
Firing a shotgun at a barn and then painting a bullseye around the cluster of bullet holes.
Right. Retroactive mapping.
Exactly. Is this just a brilliant retroactive mapping of a modern geopolitical tragedy onto ancient poetry? Because taking a biblical fraction, dividing a year, and landing on the exact start date of the largest European land war since World War II, it makes my head spin.
It's a very fair critique. It's the first thing any skeptic would say. But if we try to understand the inner logic of the author's architecture, the distinction between retroactive mapping and literal prophecy kind of dissolves.
How so? That sounds like a stretch.
Because if time is a mechanical cyclical clock, as the Vedic system insists, then the gears have to turn in specific mathematical ratios.
Okay.
The author is suggesting that ancient seers weren't just receiving vague hallucinatory visions, they were perceiving the literal mathematical ratios of these cosmic gears turning.
They just didn't have the language of astrophysics to write it down.
Exactly. So the third of the stars wasn't a poetic metaphor for fallen angels, it was an encoded formula.
Wow.
The dragon's tail whipping down wasn't a monster attacking, it was a celestial sweep of time that culminated mathematically and inevitably in a geopolitical shockwave on Earth.
It turns a mythological beast into a functional geopolitical calendar.
It really does.
And it doesn't stop with Ukraine. Having established that the dragon is Rahu and that its tail mathematically pinpointed the outbreak of that specific conflict in 2022, the framework expands.
Yes, it gets much broader.
It expands this concept to explain the broader, suffocating tension gripping the entire planet right now. It moves from explaining one regional war to explaining the global atmospheric mood.
Which brings us into the mechanics of what Vedic astrology calls a Mahadasha.
I need you to break that down for me. What is a Mahadasha, and how does it relate to the dragon?
A Mahadasha is a major planetary period. Think of it like a cosmic operating system that runs in the background of your life.
Like a software update?
Sort of, but in this case, it's running the background of the life of a nation for a set number of years.
Okay.
During a specific Mahadasha, the characteristics and energies of that ruling planet completely dominate the environment.
So what planet is running our operating system right now?
According to the framework presented here, the United States, as the primary global superpower, entered the Mahadasha of Rahu in the year 2015.
Oh boy.
And it will remain under this influence until the year 2033.
So for an 18-year stretch from 2015 to 2033, the United States is essentially sitting under the dark, heavy umbrella of the dragon.
Yes.
What does that actually mean, practically speaking? How does the author say that manifests in our daily news?
The documents state that any nation, or by extension, a world deeply influenced by that nation experiencing a Rahu Dasha, is driven by Rahu's inherent nature.
Which is shadow.
Right. Rahu is the shadow. It rules over ideologies that are inherently opposed to the Devas, or the divine harmonious forces of light and order.
Okay.
Rahu thrives in sex and political systems that are dominated by what the text calls tamasic qualities.
Tamasic. We really need to define that because understanding tamas is the master key to understanding how this author views the absolute chaos of the 2020s.
For sure. In Vedic philosophy, there are three gunas, or fundamental strands of energy, that make up all of nature and human psychology.
What are the other two?
You have sattva, which is purity, balance, wisdom, and light.
Okay, Saf is the good stuff.
Right. Then you have rajas, which is passion, action, movement, and ambition.
The drive to get things done.
Exactly. And then you have tamas. The text explicitly defines tamasic qualities as fierce, hateful, ignorant, and destructive energies.
It's the energy of delusion, isn't it?
Yes, very much so.
The energy of seeing enemies everywhere, of extreme polarization, of tearing things down just to watch them burn.
Yeah.
It's the troll on the internet. It's the political extremist. It's the utter inability to find common ground.
Precisely. Tamas is inertia and darkness.
Yeah.
And the author is arguing that because the prevailing global superpower is deep in a Rahu period, this tamasic polarized hateful energy is essentially being broadcasted globally like a radio frequency.
Like it's just in the water supply.
Exactly. It is infecting the socio-political atmosphere.
And the author connects this global tamasic infection directly back to Revelation.
Yes, chapter 12.
Chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, describes a literal war in heaven. Michael and his angels fighting the dragon and his angels. The text makes a massive, sweeping claim here. It asserts that this biblical war in heaven is not a historical event, and it's not a future battle with literal angels in the clouds.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
It says, this is a direct representation of all current global conflicts.
This is where the framework gets deeply deterministic.
Yeah, kind of takes free will out of the equation.
It really does. By framing the current global chaos this way, the author fundamentally removes geopolitics from human hands.
Wow.
The war in heaven is the invisible celestial weather pattern of Rahu's tamasic influence.
So the wars, the protests, the economic sabotage, the ideological divides we see on the news every night.
Those are just the earthly manifestations of this celestial weather.
It makes human history feel like a massive game of cosmic chess.
Or like we're just pawns.
Right. It's as if nations aren't actually making independent, rational geopolitical choices. They are just sails catching the prevailing Rahu wind that happens to be blowing across the globe until 2033. You look at the news, you see world leaders making supposedly strategic decisions, you see populations getting angry and protesting. But this framework says, no, look higher. They are just the instruments. The shadow planet is playing the instrument.
It is.
It's terrifying, but also weirdly absolving. We aren't failing, we are just mathematically required to fight right now.
And if we are caught in this deterministic weather pattern until 2033, the documents don't just look backward to explain 2022.
They look forward.
Very much so. The author uses this exact same mathematical structure to provide highly specific, extremely imminent predictions for the near future.
Imminent as in right around the corner.
Yes. And the absolute focal point of these predictions, the flashpoint of the entire timeline, is the year 2026.
Right. We move from the setup of the era into the absolute crucible.
Our pressure really ratchets up here.
In Revelation, after the dragon is cast down to earth, the text says the woman fled into the wilderness for 12,260 days. There is that highly specific math again.
The author calculates this 12,260-day wilderness period as being triggered during a very specific future transit of our old friend, the Purani Nakshatra.
Okay, so the star of birth returns.
Yes. They pinpoint this exact trigger point to April 18th and 19th, 2026.
But the lead up to that April trigger is what makes this section of the document so harrowing.
The cluster of events is intense.
The author lays out a rapid-fire sequence of astronomical and earthly events in the first quarter of 2026. We start with a solar eclipse on February 17th, 2026.
Okay.
That is followed just 2 weeks later by a lunar eclipse on March 3, 2026.
Standard eclipse season spacing.
Right. And then we hit that Purani Nakshatra transit in mid-April. What does the text predict happens during this incredibly tight 2-month window?
It makes dual predictions, one geopolitical and one geological.
Okay, let's start with the geopolitical.
Geopolitically, the framework predicts a sudden, acute conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Which is entirely plausible given current tensions.
True, but it gives an exact start date, February 28th, 2026.
Sandwiched perfectly between those two eclipses.
Exactly. It then predicts that a conditional ceasefire will take effect around April 8th, 2026.
Just 10 days before the Nakshatra transit triggers the 12,260-day countdown.
Right.
Again, reinforcing our impartiality rule here.
Right.
We're not saying this is a guaranteed future. We are just examining the audacious specificity of this author's claims.
Of course.
To use ancient eclipse cycles and lunar mansions to peg exact dates for a tripartite Middle Eastern and Western conflict is a wild application of the text.
It's extremely bold.
But the geopolitical war is only half of the 2026 prediction. You mentioned geological predictions, too.
Oh, I did. And this is where the author brings in Revelation 12, verses 15 and 16.
Remind me what those say.
Yes. Those verses describe the serpent spewing water like a river from its mouth to sweep the woman away.
Okay.
But the earth helps the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river.
Now, how does the author interpret a celestial dragon spewing a river of water?
Well, they take it brutally, literally, don't they?
They do. The text interprets this river as massive, localized natural disasters occurring within that exact same eclipse window of early 2026.
Physical water.
Physical devastation. It explicitly lists massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and severe, devastating water challenges.
Right.
We are talking about anomalous heavy rain, unprecedented floods, tsunamis, and crises involving filthy, contaminated water supplies.
So the river from the dragon's mouth is literal, physical, earthly devastation.
Exactly. But the text also notes the earth swallows the water.
Correct. The author notes that these intense geological events will be terrifying, but they will be short-lived.
Okay, that's a relief.
The physical earth will quickly begin restoring its equilibrium. The floodwaters will recede. The ground will stop shaking.
But here's where we have to dig into the mechanism of what this author is proposing. Because the physical restoration of the earth is almost a misdirection.
How do you mean?
The ground stops shaking, but the psychological damage to humanity is permanent. The text claims that following these natural disasters, around the time of the next eclipse cycle, in August 2026, the entire nature of global conflict will dramatically mutate.
Ah, yes. This is the critical pivot in the biblical text from chapter 12 to chapter 13 of Revelation.
Right.
The documents state that in late 2026 and into 2027, we will witness the fall of the dragon and the subsequent rise of the two beasts.
And what triggers the beasts?
The natural disasters.
Wow. So the physical trauma leads to political monsters.
Exactly. The physical chaos of early 2026 mutates into ideological chaos. The nature of global conflict shifts from border disputes and natural survival to profound, foundational, religious, and ideological conflicts.
The source states this shift will lead to a rapid, deep decline in old Orthodox religions. People will just abandon the faiths they've held for centuries.
Yes.
And Revelation 13 warns that the beast gets authority for 42 months. It speaks arrogantly, it blasphemes, and it wages war on the saints. But I want to spend a minute exploring why this happens.
It's a crucial point.
How does an earthquake lead to the rise of an anti-religious beast?
It's a fascinating sociological causal pattern the author has constructed. Look at the sequence.
Okay, I'm tracking.
First, you have the physical celestial events, the eclipses and planetary transits. These act as the initial cosmic triggers.
Gears turning.
Right. This immense cosmic pressure translates into literal physical kinetic energy on Earth. The tectonic plates shift, the oceans rise, the Earth physically shudders under the cosmic weight.
Right.
Now, what happens to a society when a massive natural disaster hits?
Panic.
Infrastructure fails. Supply chains collapse. The state cannot protect you.
Right. It's every man for himself.
When human survival is threatened on a mass scale, the psychological and sociological foundations of a society destabilize instantly. People look at the devastation and they ask, where was God? Why did our institutions fail us?
That makes total sense. Think about how you feel when you just watch a major disaster on the news.
It's deeply unsettling.
Like a hurricane wiping out a coast or an earthquake leveling a city. It shakes your foundational security. You realize how fragile the electrical grid, the water supply, and the grocery stores really are.
We are always just 3 meals away from anarchy.
Exactly. Now imagine that trauma on a planetary scale. The text is suggesting that this collective global trauma in early 2026 is exactly the psychological wedge needed to shatter the foundations of Orthodox religion and traditional government.
Exactly. The trauma creates a vacuum.
Right.
When people are terrified and disillusioned with the old systems that fail to protect them, they become incredibly vulnerable to new, radical ideologies.
Ideologies that promise order, security, and strength.
Yes, that psychological vulnerability vulnerability is the fertile ground for the beasts of Chapter 13.
So what are these beasts in a modern context?
The text frames these beasts as new, highly authoritarian, likely technologically driven or radical ideological systems that step into the power vacuum.
And immediately wage war on whatever is left of the old religious orthodoxies.
It is a terrifying but entirely logical domino effect.
It really is. It starts with the math of the cosmos, moves to the tectonic plates of the Earth, shatters the human mind, and completely rewrites global society.
And the timeline doesn't stop there.
Of course not. It progresses relentlessly into what the source describes as the absolute darkest phase of this entire Yuga Paravartan.
We move from the chaos and the rise of the beasts in 2026 to the year 2029.
Right.
And the text describes an event here that is, frankly, it's chilling to read. It calculates the date by going back to that 12,260-day wilderness period mentioned in Revelation 12.12.
Right. A time, times, and half a time.
Exactly. In prophetic mathematics, a time, times, and half a time is universally understood as 3.5 years, which is 1,260 days.
Okay, doing the math again.
If you take the trigger date we established for the wilderness period, the Parani Nakshatra transit, on April 18th, 2026, and you add exactly 1,260 days to it, where do you land?
You land exactly on November 20, 2029.
And what does the framework say happens on November 20, 2029?
I remember this part, and it gave me goosebumps.
The source states that during this period, something called Daiva will temporarily disconnect from the Earth.
Daiva. The text translates this as the divine connection.
Yes. It ties all the way back to the very first concept introduced in the source material, where the author described this entire era as a loyalty test.
Right, the loyalty test.
The author explicitly writes that during this 2029 period, quote, even prayers are not accepted.
Even prayers are not accepted. That is a staggering, existentially terrifying concept.
It really is.
We're talking about a period where the cosmic dial tone just goes dead. The divine Wi-Fi is unplugged.
You're just talking to the ceiling.
What does that actually mean for humanity? Does everyone just wake up one Tuesday and feel a massive sense of anomie, a crushing existential dread?
It is the ultimate dark night of the soul, but experienced collectively on a planetary scale.
Wow.
The author is framing this intense period of global suffering and spiritual silence not as an arbitrary punishment from an angry deity, but as a necessary mechanical filter.
It is the peak heat of the forest fire.
Exactly. The old wood has to burn.
The text explicitly says this is when the old corrupted systems and hate-filled people are filtered out.
While the true righteous people will pass through this filter.
It also notes that the infamous 7 seals of Revelation actually represent 2 distinct event clusters in this process.
Right, one cluster that already happened from 2012 to 2019.
And the current final cluster tearing through from 2025 to 2033. But I have to point out how deeply unsettling the mechanics of this filter are.
They are very harsh.
The author quotes Revelation 13.10 right at the beginning of the text to set the mood.
Oh, that verse. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go.
Yeah. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints.
It sounds incredibly bleak.
It's entirely fatalistic. If the divine Wi-Fi is down, if prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, and the bad actors, the beasts, the Tamazic forces of Rahu are running rampant and putting people in captivity.
What are the righteous supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. What are you supposed to do according to this framework? There is no call to arms here. There is no strategic plan to rise up and defeat the beast. Is the instruction really just to survive the filter?
Just hunker down and endure the mechanical processing of the era?
Yeah.
That is the uncompromising implication of the text. Patient endurance.
That is so hard to swallow.
If you accept the fundamental premise of this framework, that this is a mathematical celestial cycle governed by vast planetary periods, then human intervention is essentially useless.
Because you can't fight math.
Exactly. You can no more fight the rise of the beasts or the disconnection of Daiva than you can fight a lunar eclipse with a sword.
It is celestial weather.
You cannot stop a hurricane. You can only board up your windows, practice patient endurance, and wait for the cycle to shift.
And thankfully, according to this mind-bending math, the cycle does finally shift.
Yes, the storm does eventually break.
The dark night of the soul ends. We move from the grueling Tamazic tests of the 2020s through the terrifying divine silence of 2029 and into the ultimate mathematical resolution of the prophecy.
Which brings us to the final major symbol we need to decode to understand the endpoint of this timeline, the Lamb.
Okay. The
In
Lamb.
Revelation, after all the devastation, after the beasts and the dragon, the Lamb stands in triumph on Mount Zion alongside 144,000 sealed individuals.
Oh, in traditional settings, you will hear endless, exhausting debates about who those 144,000 people are.
Oh, for sure.
Are they literal Jewish tribes? Are they a metaphor for the entire church? Are they a specific modern denomination?
It's a huge point of contention.
But our author, true to form, ignores the human debate entirely and looks back up at the sky.
They really do stick to the astrophysics. The source reveals that the Lamb of God is not a person and it's not a human institution.
It is the planet Jupiter.
Yes.
Jupiter, the massive gas giant. Why Jupiter?
In Vedic astrology, Jupiter is known as Guru. It is the ultimate benefic planet.
Okay, the good guy.
Exactly. While Rahu is the shadow, Jupiter represents wisdom, dharma, cosmic justice, expansion, and divine grace.
It is the exact mathematical and spiritual counterweight to Rahu's dark, chaotic, tamasic energy.
It balances the equation perfectly.
So the dragon is Rahu, the shadow bringing the fire. And the Lamb is Jupiter, the light bringing the restoration.
Exactly. And the text provides a specific timeline for Jupiter's triumph over the shadow.
Okay, when does that happen?
Remember, the dark Rahu Mahadasha that is currently dominating the U.S. and broadcasting tamasic energy globally ends in the year 2033.
Okay, so 2033 is the end of the dragon's reign.
The source states that right around this time, Jupiter completes what it calls an accelerated phase. But the true monumental shift happens shortly after that.
Right, what comes next?
Between the years 2036 and 2044, Jupiter enters an 8-year extended accelerated megacycle.
That sounds intense.
The specific Vedic astrological term used in the text is Atachari.
Let's clarify Atachari for a second. This has to do with how the planet appears to move from our perspective on Earth, right? It's like retrograde motion. But instead of seeming to move backward, the planet appears to be moving incredibly fast through the zodiac.
Precisely. It's a period of accelerated apparent motion.
Okay.
This 8-year Atachari megacycle of Jupiter, this is the astrological equivalent of the Lamb taking its final victorious stand on Mount Zion.
Oh, wow.
It is the divine reasserting control over the celestial mechanics. The era of the shadow is mathematically over.
And this is where the author performs what might be the most brilliant piece of interpretive math in the entire document.
It really is the crown jewel of the theory.
They tackle the mystery of the 144,000. The source claims that this number is not a head count of people who get saved.
No, it's a measurement of time.
How do you turn a crowd of 144,000 people into a calendar? Walk me through the translation there.
You have to understand the linguistic tools available to ancient civilization.
Right, they didn't have our vocabulary.
Exactly. Particularly those who were compiling the Puranas, the ancient Indian texts. The source points out that ancient records often use the term Manusha Varsh.
Which literally translates to man years or human years.
Yes. You see, these ancient astronomers lacked our modern scientific vocabulary for massive astronomical epochs.
They didn't have words like millennia or light years.
Exactly. So they encoded deep, complex astronomical cycles using the only metaphors they had at their disposal.
Herds of animals, populations, counts of men, and days.
Precisely.
Okay, so the text argues that when John of Patmos wrote that 144,000 people were sealed on Mount Zion, he actually meant 144,000 days were sealed in the timeline.
Yes, and here is where the math clicks into place perfectly.
Do the math for me.
The ancient Vedic solar calendar uses an idealized 360-day year, matching the 360 degrees of the celestial circle.
Okay, so not 365, but 360.
Right. If you take those 144,000 days and divide them by a 360-day solar year, what do you get?
Let me do that. 144,000 divided by 360 equals exactly 400.
400 years.
Wow.
The ultimate conclusion of the entire framework is this. Following Jupiter's extended Atichari megacycle, which ends in the year 2044, the violent filter of the Yuga Parivartan is finally complete.
The forest fire is out.
The old world has burned away, the divine connection is restored, and humanity officially enters a 400-year golden age of new human civilization.
So instead of a VIP club of 144,000 specific people getting saved from the apocalypse while everyone else burns, the text is actually saying, here is a cosmic stopwatch.
Yes, start the clock.
Once the Jupiter cycle ends in 2044, start the clock. You have exactly 144,000 days of peace. The biblical text was literally a calendar masquerading as a population census.
It's an incredibly elegant, mathematically sound solution to one of the most debated and misunderstood numbers in religious history.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the massive trajectory we just covered, because it is a lot to hold in your head at once.
It is a staggering amount of data.
This single unified framework takes us from the October 2022 eclipses, which perfectly mirrored the pregnant woman of Revelation,
Right.
to the James Webb Space Telescope barking at the Dragon's Gate of Lagrange point L2.
Which initiated the exact mathematical countdown that precisely pinpointed the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war in February 2022.
Which is just one earthly symptom of a larger global war in heaven.
Driven by the dark, polarized tamasic energy of the Rahu Mahadasha dominating our current era until 2033.
Then we have the extremely imminent predictions for 2026. A tight window of eclipses in February and March triggering massive natural disasters.
The Earth swallowing the river.
Right, and a specific geopolitical conflict and ceasefire in the Middle East. These physical traumas lead directly to the psychological collapse of orthodox systems and the rise of the two beasts.
All of which triggers the 12-town and 60-day wilderness period.
Culminating in November 2029, where the divine connection Daiva temporarily unplugs, forcing humanity to patiently endure the ultimate mechanical filter.
Until finally, the planetary gears shift, the Rahu period burns itself out.
Jupiter, the Lamb, asserts its 8-year accelerated megacycle, mathematically resolving the 144,000 metaphor into a 400-year golden age kicking off in 2044.
It is exhausting. It is terrifying. But it is undeniably brilliant in its construction.
It really is.
And that is exactly why this synthesis matters, regardless of what you, the listener, personally believe about the validity of prophecy, the Book of Revelation, or Vedic astrology.
Exactly. You don't have to believe it to be fascinated by it.
What we have examined today is an absolute masterclass in the profound human drive to synthesize. We are inherently meaning-making machines.
We want to find patterns in the chaos.
This author has taken seemingly disparate, completely disconnected data points, ancient esoteric scripture, orbital physics, eclipses, planetary mahadashas, and the chaotic, terrifying evening news, and forged them into one cohesive, structurally sound narrative.
It provides a fascinating deterministic lens through which to view the terrifying chaos of world events.
It offers an underlying structure to the noise. It says, don't panic, it looks like chaos, but the clock is just ticking.
It turns the kaleidoscope of the daily news into a compass. And, looking at this author's blueprint leaves you with a really profound thought to chew on.
What's that?
Think about how this author translated the ancient metaphor of a dragon's tail into the literal math of orbital days. Or how they turned a census of 144,000 people into a 400-year calendar.
Yeah, changing the language completely.
Right. If these ancient authors were actually recording highly sophisticated astronomical cycles in cosmic math using the only language they had, the metaphors of beasts, pregnant women, and angels, it makes you wonder.
Wonder what?
Look around at the world right now. Look at how we talk about AI, quantum computing, or dark matter. What monumental realities are we describing today using our own modern technological scientific jargon that humans 2,000 years from now will look back on and completely misinterpret as literal magic or myth?
That is a wild thought.
What is our version of the Red Dragon? Keep jiving deep, and we'll see you next time.